Okay, so basically, I decided to post this video for anybody who has children, and I felt like it was important for me to post it as like an awareness video because I think there's a variation with illnesses and the way that we get different diagnoses and things go missed. And I think it's important to post these kinds of things so that people can see the warning signs and then know what to expect. Because, we all present with symptoms differently. And I'm actually posting it for my daughter, Evelyn. She had almost like I would say a flu. They diagnosed it a flu-like illness a couple weeks back, so that it wasn't treated with anything except for, just rest and, lots of water, lots of juice, and she didn't want to eat much. But she had this cough, and this cough started off dry, and, it was almost like a hacking, dry cough, and she was whiny. And so I figured, she had definitely had some congestion and stuff like that. In the beginning, she had a little bit of diarrhea. And finally, after running fever for a good, week or so, that I had to keep giving her Tylenol Motrin, I decided let's take her to her GP. So we take her and the baby both in there. And the baby, who had actually been at the ER the night before and was diagnosed with viral syndrome, kind of flu-like illness as well, was quiet enough during the exam that my GP actually heard what they call like a little rattle or a crackle, almost like bubbles. So she was diagnosed with, a type of bronchitis / pneumonia that day, and was given azithromycin, the Z-Pack, for 5 days. And she started slowly getting better with holding no temperature or anything like that. Well, with the other girl, she looked in her ears, Evelyn, which is my almost 3-year-old. She checked the ears and listened. And at the time, she couldn't hear anything in the lungs, although she did figure out that her left ear was pretty infected. She said it was really, really bad infected. So they put her on something called Ceftonir, or they call it Omnicef, but it's been taken off the market as Omnicef. And it's a antibiotic for, it's very strong for sinus infections, ear infections, mainly focusing in this area. And larger kids, of course, the older children that are of certain age can take it in the larger dosages, and it can be effective against certain lung infections. So she's on the antibiotic, and the next morning she wakes up and she's spiked 105-degree fever. And I'm thinking, how do you be on an antibiotic and you still run that high of a fever? So I called them back and they said, well, it may just very well be that takes a little bit of time, 24 to 48 hours, for that medicine to work. So I brought fever down. She slept that night. And this is now Friday, which was a couple days ago. This is Friday afternoon. I'm working and I get a call from the daycare. And they say, Mom, we need you to come get Evelyn now. She's lethargic. She's sick. She's not feeling well. I said, okay. So by the time I get there, her condition had plummeted, and she was probably at least 70% worse than when I got the phone call. And it only took me 30 minutes to get there. So I get there and she's just laying there. She looks pretty pale, and the lady's just, rubbing her hair and has a rag on her head for her fever. And she was 103.5 under her arm. So rectally, she would have been 2 degrees above that. So probably well over 105 degrees. So we go ahead and take her to Medical City, Dallas. And I brought her in, and she's kind of lifeless. Her eyes look goopy and like sticky. They're kind of hard to open. She's laying there, sprawled out with her arms out. And I kind of panicked when they told me to just sit down and wait to be called. And I was like, oh, no. Because I lost my brother a couple years ago. And I remember when his eyes kind of looked hazed over like that. So I panicked and I said, no, I've seen this before. My brother went brain dead, and I don't like the way her eyes look. She just looks very sick. And the lady was like, okay, I was calling her back right now. So they get her back there, and, they get the doctor in there immediately to listen. and they're taking these notes down, and they made it very proactive for me, which I thought was very neat. Like, she let me look in her ear to show me that the ear that was infected was starting to clear up, but this side was getting really bad to the point that it was about ready to rupture. Like, it was bulging, it almost looked like a grape inside of her ear, like an infected grape. And it was getting, not literally a grape, because that'd be too big for your eardrum, but what I mean is just the general idea of it, a purple ball that was expanding, So she let me look at that, and then she let me hear what she was hearing on the stethoscope, and she called it like bubbling. So she was 100% sure on the diagnosis without any x-rays that she was going to come back with pneumonia. And so they started IVs immediately, blood draws to check for the white, blood cell count. And they put, I believe they put her on Recephlin, which is a really strong IV intravenous type antibiotic, just to kind of kick some of the symptoms, because she was just so very sick. And they ended up prescribing her the highest dose of amoxicillin, which does take care of all this upper respiratory illness that they get. And she was sent home about 4 or 5 hours later after they brought her fever down, and she hasn't had fever since she started, so she's doing really good. The only reason I thought it was important is because whenever my kids get sick, I go on there and I look at things to see, like, what are symptoms, what have other parents said. And basically, what I learned from this lesson was, in my head, I was thinking it can't be anything serious because she's already on an antibiotic. But little did I know that the Ceftonir antibiotic will not work in the dosages that they do for pneumonia. So she was just slowly kind of accruing it. And when I say not classic symptoms, I mean, there was nothing to alert you that she was developing pneumonia. Like, she acted like a normal kid, besides the fact that maybe she was a little more tired. She ate, she drank. So it's not always presented the same way, but literally, I mean, from a matter of 10 minutes to an hour makes all the difference in the world, because by the time I had brought her in, she was in respiratory distress. She needed oxygen. Her levels were at 80, in between 89 and 91, which is really low, especially for a child that doesn't have, any type of asthma, or like adults with COPD. They may have some oxygen levels, saturation levels that low, but you should never see that on a child. And so they get sick quick, really fast. And so, we talk about viral pneumonia and we talk about bacterial pneumonia. And obviously the difference between the two is it can start off, and this is why I want everyone to listen, because it can start off viral, which is what I believe happened, but it can quickly convert over to bacterial, because that phlegm and all that stuff just sits in their lungs. Kids, they can't blow their nose good. They can't hawk this stuff up. So, but literally by the time I had gotten there, she was probably, nearing the point of like death. And so, being young like that, especially young people, the elderly patients, it's really, really important to pay close attention to these symptoms and get them seen. Because nothing has scared me like that did. And I was scared to death. Like, even in the room, just waiting to hear the diagnosis and seeing him start all those IVs and pick and poke on her, I almost started to have a panic attack just thinking about how, scared she must be. And not only that, but I was thinking, to myself, I feel terrible, because it's like, I don't know how long she was feeling this way before, she just got sick enough to actually alert, like, hey, you need to go. But the biggest one being that the classic symptom she didn't have that made me believe it was pneumonia at first. Once we did decide to take her to the ER, the one thing that I would tell any of you parents to look for is their respiratory rate, because that's pretty much what gave it away. And when you see a child breathe, you see the steady breathing. I could see her heartbeat just thumping. It's just so fast in her neck. And I remember I could see her neck muscles. And when she would breathe, I could tell it was very evident that it was almost like she was struggling to breathe because she was breathing really shallow but super fast. And every once in a blue moon, I could see a little sinkage where the ribs were. So these are things that you definitely need to look at. If you ever see this and it's accompanied with a fever, please take your child ASAP. Since then, she's doing good. I can also show some photos of what she looked like when she got in. Shows how pale she was, and just, she didn't even fight them when they did the IV, which is not my daughter. It usually takes 5 people to be in the room, but she was that sick that she just laid there and cried. So just keep that in mind, being that it's just now starting to go into the spring season, and a lot of these flus that the flu season ended, but a lot of these flus that everyone's just now getting over can develop into this. Any type of RSV, any type of lung infection that they had prior, that maybe it was a viral, can quickly, and I mean fast, it can go into a bacterial stage. And so I just want to make sure that you guys get educated with it, and I wanted to share it in case anyone else has any questions about pneumonia, or if they're looking it up, because when I looked up pneumonia on all the different WebMDs and Kids Health, I was confident, 90% confident she did not have pneumonia, and she did. So anyways, I thank you guys if you are watching, and just make sure that, when anything like that happens, just always go with your gut feeling, because I knew something was wrong that day. And of course, those are your kiddos. So just make sure you get them seen. If there's anything that you ever question, it's always better safe than sorry. Thank you.